What's the difference between fear and pain? Well, not as much as you might think. My client, Denis, was a big fan of CrossFit. In fact, that was his first love. He liked running and he used to run half marathons, but really it was CrossFit that stole his heart. And he would go to his local CrossFit box 3 or 4 days a week. For those of you who don't know, in CrossFit, they call it a CrossFit box because it's usually like a just a warehouse with a bunch of barbells and weights and squat racks and stuff, and it's pretty empty. Now, I don't know if any of you guys are CrossFitters, but if you are, or if you know any, you may know that they are famously zealous in their love of the sport. In fact, many people make jokes about how CrossFit is like a bit of a cult, and it's a joke, but a lot of truth is said in jest. I think this is awesome. The members of CrossFit Box usually become like their own little tribe, and that keeps them coming back because they enjoy it so much, and that keeps them healthy, which is totally fine by me. This is a lot like our running clubs that we go to that help hold us accountable and motivate us to keep coming back. But really, CrossFit takes it to a whole other level. And that's how Denis saw his CrossFit buddies. They were like his little tribe, and that was awesome. But the problem was that he'd been suffering from like this kind of hippie back pain for over a year. Denis had had some early success with dry needling with a local physiotherapist, and he was seeing a sports doctor for a certain type of injection. And that really was helping reduce the pain. The trouble was that he couldn't really get back into CrossFit or running. So whenever he would run longer or he would do like heavier workouts at CrossFit, the pain would just flare up again. So the injections and dry needling really helped settle the pain down, but he was kind of stuck. He couldn't really go back to the things that he loved. And again, if you know any CrossFitters, that you know that like taking it easy is really not a big part of their culture. So, although he was able to continue going, he couldn't push as hard as he wanted to. Because he couldn't push as hard as he wanted to, he couldn't really enjoy it. He couldn't join in with the sort of friendly competition and that kind of aspect of CrossFit. And that was really spoiling it for him. And it made him not want to go so much. And this really sucked for Denis. He was running less, he was working out less, he was seeing his friends less. And understandably, that started to make him feel pretty crappy. So when Denis and I met for his free call initially, we chatted through all of this. We talked about where he was stuck, what he was having trouble with, and what he wanted to get back to, which was primarily getting back to CrossFit so he could hang out with his tribe again. So when Denis decided to start working with us, I told him that he's going to have to cut out CrossFit entirely for at least a month. And I didn't want to do this. I have nothing against CrossFit, but the problem with CrossFit, or actually one of its benefits when everything's going well, is the variety. So pretty much every CrossFit workout is entirely different from the last one. And that's great for keeping people engaged and making the workouts fun. But when you're in a rehab setting, that's the exact opposite of what you want because you want to be able to quantify the mechanical stress that the injured area is experiencing so that you can then see how the tissues in the injured area respond and increase or reduce the stress according to the symptom changes. And obviously, Denny wasn't terribly keen on this idea, but he bought into it and he accepted that in order for things to change, things had to change. So he took the month off and we switched him to a more predictable and systematic strength program. Now, at this point, you might be wondering, what the hell does any of this have to do with fear and pain? Well, I'm getting to that. So Denis really had two problems. He had the pain in his back. Now, when we feel pain in our back or in any part of our body, it's essentially like a little danger alarm. We feel the pain to alert us to the danger, we take action to avoid the danger, and then we survive. The system works. When we feel fear, it's actually not that different. We feel fear based on the interpretation of our situation and the environment in which we find ourselves. When we feel fear, it means that we've interpreted that environment as danger. So, fear is a danger alarm, just like pain. Said another way, pain in our body is a physiological danger alarm, and fear in our mind is a psychological danger alarm. And both systems are designed to detect danger and motivate us to take action that keeps us safe. So, the dry needling and injections that Denis had had originally to help with his back pain had helped with the physiological pain in his back, but they hadn't helped with the psychological fear in his mind. The problem is that fear and pain are two sides of the same coin. We like to divide things up into like body stuff and brain stuff, but really, these are all part of one nervous system and one body. So, when Denis feared that the pain in his back indicated that he was damaging his body, the fear caused the nervous system to become more sensitive and actually increase the level of pain that Denis experienced. And after all, this is because these two systems are working together to detect danger and keep us safe. And this is not some fringe, strange thing that only happens sometimes. Every time you feel pain anywhere in your body, even if you just stub your toe, it's interpreted both physiologically by the body and psychologically by the brain to determine the answer to one question: how much danger am I in? If the body determines that you're in lots of danger, then you'll experience lots of pain. If the body determines that you're only in a little bit of danger, then you'll only experience a little bit of pain. Now, many people sort of chalk this up to being like a placebo effect or saying things like it's all in your head. But really, that's a bit like saying that university is a place where you go to learn stuff, which is basically true, but it's so oversimplified that it's actually pretty much wrong. So we needed to identify and treat both problems with Denis: the physiological pain in his back and the psychological fear in his mind. So let's start with the easy one, which is the physiological pain in his back. So we got Denis running and lifting weights regularly. We figured out how much the tissues in his back could handle, and then we gradually added more a little bit week on week. As long as we didn't add too much or too little, we would find that adaptive zone. The tissues would adapt to the stress and become more tolerant of that stress. And this process, I like to say, is simple but not easy. It is actually quite difficult, but it is the foundation of all good rehabilitation. Now, we also had to tackle the fear problem. And when I say fear here, I'm not saying that Denis was scared of the pain in any way. What I'm saying is that he was subconsciously worried about what the meaning of the pain was. Did it mean that he was damaging himself? Did it mean that it wasn't going to get better? Did it mean that he was going to have to quit running? Did it mean that he was going to have to quit CrossFit? If it meant that he had to quit CrossFit, did that mean he was going to lose his friends? If it got worse because he was damaging it, did that mean he was going to be unable to do his job, which involved like a lot of manual labor? And you can see what happens here. This is a worry spiral that I'm sure we're all familiar with. It usually happens on a subconscious level, but this is something that happens to all of us. When we experience pain, we are fearful of what the pain means. So if the pain is pretty mild and only has a mild impact on our life, then we're going to have a very mild amount of fear associated with it. Conversely, if the pain is very significant, or it's been going on for a long time, or it's had an impact on our life that was quite pronounced, then there's going to be more fear and worry in our subconscious mind associated and connected with that pain. And remember, we said that fear and pain are two sides of the same coin and they feed into each other. So more fear, more pain, more pain, more fear. So how do we fix this problem? How do we get Denis' brain to stop running that worry spiral? Well, have you ever heard of the saying, we fear what we don't understand? I personally think this is one of those quotes that is absolutely true. A great example of this is if you've ever been camping in the woods, particularly on your own, and you have to get up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom. So you put your headlamp on or your flashlight and you flash it into the woods to try and see where you're going. And all you can see is like one row of the closest trees. And beyond that, there's just this kind of endless blackness. It's terrifying. But that exact same spot in the middle of the day, not so scary. When we can see where we are and we understand our situation, we feel safe. So this was my plan with Denis. Help him to see where he is, to understand his situation, and to understand what the pain means and what it doesn't mean. And this, when we were working with Denis, really came down to support. So when we're working with runners, trying to get them back from an injury, they can message us as much as they like. Whenever we get a message from a runner, we always reply. And this was really important part of Denis' rehabilitation. And the reason that I'm so convinced that fear was a significant part of Denis' problem is that Early on, when we were working together, Denis had so many questions about what his pain meant in terms of should he do more? Should he do less? Was he damaging himself? Did it mean that we had the wrong diagnosis, the right diagnosis? Where was this going to go in the future? And all of these kind of things. He also had a really good understanding of the pathology and the anatomy of the area, having had a bunch of medical consultations and done his own research, and he clearly was trying to better understand his situation. Now, after a couple of months of messaging back and forth most days, I noticed that Denis wasn't really messaging so much. And when he did, he wasn't really asking as many questions. And they didn't have that kind of anxious concern to them that they had earlier on when we started working together. And I took this as a really positive sign. My interpretation was that his subconscious brain was becoming less worried and less fearful. And he was starting to feel deep down safer. And as I've said before, less fear, less pain. Less pain, less fear. So we had turned this vicious cycle around, and now it was becoming more of a virtuous cycle. So Denis was starting to understand what his pain meant and what it didn't mean. It wasn't going to keep getting worse. He wasn't damaging himself. He had control of it. There was things he could do to make it better. He was seeing steady progress in his running. He was lifting a little bit more each week, going a little bit more intensely. Now, granted, there were speed bumps along the way, but importantly, these were speed bumps, not brick walls. So if we fear what we don't understand, then the opposite must also be true, that we don't fear what we do understand. After 3 months, Denis was back to CrossFit and going as hard as he ever had. He'd also started running more, and he was running half marathon distances pretty easily now without any pain. I asked him how his back was doing one time, and he said, to be honest, I don't think about it that much. Job done. If any of Denis' story resonates with you and you think that might be part of the problem that you're having with your running injury, we might be able to help. Just click the link in the description and book a free call with us, and we'll have a chat.